she died without a scream and was buried without a name. But her spirit didn't rest. Her grave cracked open, and her silence returned louder than thunder. Now the city whispers one name, Amaka. Her sister, Aduri, returned not to fight but to listen. Because some souls don't want revenge, they want the truth to rise. This is not just a ghost story. It's a warning. In a crowded part of New Lagos, where yellow buses fought for space and people shouted to sell everything from cold zobo to used curtains, there stood a tall gray building called Block East of Iron Street Estate. It was not the cleanest place. The water sometimes ran brown. The elevator groaned like it hated its job. But still, people lived there, students, single mothers, retired teachers, and men who didn't talk much. Everyone in Block E knew one thing: don't rent Flat 4C. Flat 4C had stayed empty for over a year. No matter how desperate people were, they avoided it. Even landlords didn't push it anymore. But one day, a quiet woman moved in. No announcement. No party. No truck full of things. She came with just a black suitcase and a large gray scarf wrapped over her head like a secret. Her name was Amaka. She didn't greet people. She didn't come out for morning prayer or take part in Saturday cleanup. The children called her the ghost auntie. Some said she stared at the wall for hours. Others claimed she whispered to someone who wasn't there. Mrs. Talou from 4B tried to greet her once and came back shivering. Her eyes, she said, they're too quiet, like nothing is alive inside. Amaka paid her rent early every month, cleaned her doorway. But nobody ever saw her cook. Nobody saw her buy food. Yet every night, a soft smell of bitter leaf soup floated from her flat. Some nights, a slow, sad song drifted into the corridor. It was not a song anyone recognized, but it pulled at your heart like it knew your pain. Then one Saturday, she didn't come out. By Monday morning, the smell started. A thick, heavy smell like burnt rubber and old flowers. They knocked. No answer. The landlord broke the door. Amaka was dead. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, arms crossed like she was hugging herself. Her head rested gently to the side. Her eyes were open but soft, as if she had gone to sleep in the middle of thinking. There was no sign of struggle. No blood. Just a small clay pot next to her, filled with black water and burnt paper. Police came and went. No family came to claim her. No phone numbers. No ID. The landlord said. She paid with cash and fake name, probably. He just wanted the flat cleaned and rented again. Amaka was buried quickly, too quickly. No one prayed. No one cried. Her body was laid under the sharp sun of a Butte cemetery, covered with weak sand and a nameless concrete slab. 2 days later, the slab cracked open. A night guard heard it first, a loud thump like someone kicking from underground. He ran. The next morning, the grave was empty. And in Block E, strange things began. Lights in Flat 4C started turning on, though no one had the keys. A soft song, the same one from before, started playing at night again. Neighbors heard footsteps above their ceiling when no one lived upstairs. A child in 3A said a woman in a scarf told him to be quiet or she'll come back hungry. The elevator refused to stop on the 4th floor. It would skip from 3 to 5, buzzing angrily. Children stopped playing in the corridor. Workers came home early. Then one boy went missing. His name was Dammy. 8 years old. Always laughing. He liked to chase lizards and drink Fanta. On a Tuesday afternoon, he entered the 4th floor with a piece of chalk to draw on the walls. He never came back. His mother screamed. Police searched the whole building. Nothing. But someone found Dammy's chalk drawings in Flat 4C. Strange symbols. Circles inside squares. A woman with no face but long hair like smoke. That night, Block E became a ghost building. People left with just their phones and bags. Some ran without shoes. Even the landlord packed out. Flat 4C stayed open. Curtains fluttered. Lights blinked. And still the song played. From the market, people would look up and see Amaka standing by the window, her head turned slightly, her scarf loose. But when anyone pointed, she would vanish. They called pastors. They poured anointing oil. They burned incense. Nothing worked. A woman from another building, Mama Uju, shouted, "That one no be ghost! That one carry debt from the land of bones." No one believed her until the dreams started. The people from far parts of Lagos began to dream the same thing. A woman buried in the wrong ground whispering, "Bring me home." A conductor had the dream and crashed his bus the next day. A teacher had the dream and began writing with her left hand only, saying it wasn't her writing, it was hers. Fear spread like fire. Newspapers ignored it. Blogs whispered it. But no one went near Flat 4C. Then something strange happened. A girl came to the estate. She wore a long white dress, eyes sharp like she saw shadows. She had a basket of herbs and a bag of bones. She stood in front of the building, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Umaka." Someone asked, "Who are you?" She opened her eyes and said softly, "I am Aduri. I have come for my sister." Aduri stood in front of the haunted building like she had been called there by something older than time. Her feet didn't move. Her fingers tightened around her basket. In the distance, thunder rolled even though the sky was still. From behind old curtains, scared eyes watched her. Children peeped from balconies. An old woman whispered to her grandson, "That's not just a girl. That's a spirit caller." Aduri had not seen her sister, Umaka, in almost 10 years. Not since that day in the small backyard where they screamed at each other, both crying, both broken. Umaka had walked away that day and never came back. She ran to the city. Aduri stayed in the village. Until now. Now something had dragged her here, something that didn't belong in either world. She stepped inside the building. The walls were cold. The air was heavier than outside, like every breath was a weight. She walked up the stairs. One by one, past the cracked paint and flickering bulbs. To the 4th floor. The door to Flat 4C was wide open. Inside, the air smelled like wet charcoal and flowers left too long in the sun. Her feet stopped at the edge of the doorway. Then she stepped in. The room was empty. No furniture. No signs of life. But the air hummed. Then she saw it. On the far wall, drawn with chalk, were symbols she recognized, the signs of a spiritual bond broken by death. She reached into her basket and pulled out a small clay pot. She placed it on the floor and whispered, "If you are here, sister, show me." The light bulb blinked. Curtains moved without wind. And then the air turned cold. A voice, soft and cracked, like it had come through smoke and tears, said, "Aduri." Aduri closed her eyes. Her lips trembled. "I'm here, Amaka. I should have come sooner." The room began to spin. A wind rose. And with it, a story. The spirit of Amaka, weak but still restless, showed her past. Long ago, when Amaka ran to the city, she was not running from Aduri. She was running from a curse she had taken upon herself. She had fallen in love with a man who was already promised to another. When he betrayed her, leaving her alone and pregnant, she cried to the heavens for justice. But no one answered. So she looked for help in the dark places. She met a woman with red eyes and no shadow under the old bridge near Odo Market. The woman said, "Give me your future and I'll give you power." Amaka agreed. She lost the baby. But she gained a voice that could command silence. She gained knowledge of roots that healed and hurt. And for a while she was safe. But power from the dead is not a gift. It is a loan. And when her time came, the spirits came for her. She tried to hide. Tried to die in an unknown city. But the spirits were angry. Her soul was still bound to her blood family, to Eduri. She couldn't rest. She couldn't cross over. And her debt began to leak into the world. That was why her grave cracked. That was why Dami disappeared. Why people dreamed her name. The debt was not just hers anymore. It was Eduri's too. When the vision ended, Eduri sat still, heart beating like a drum in a storm. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Oh, sister, what have you done?" She stood up and left the flat. Outside, the people gathered. Some had phones. Some had holy books. Some just stared. A man stepped forward. "Are you the one who called her back?" Eduri shook her head. "No. She was never gone. She's stuck. Between life and death." The man laughed nervously. "So, what do we do? Burn the building?" Eduri raised her hand. "No. Fire won't help. Prayer won't help. You need someone who knows the language of the dead. Someone who understands the cost of a broken promise." They asked who. She said the bone caller. The bone caller was not easy to find. He lived under Third Bridge, near the edge of Makoko, where water met wood and secrets floated like canoes. People said he hadn't been seen in years. Some said he had turned into a crocodile. Others said he was mad. But Eduri knew the signs. She followed the blackbirds. She asked the crippled beggar at Marina. She listened to whispers from street dogs that howled at nothing. Then, under a broken statue of a colonial general, she found him. He looked like he was made from smoke and palm ash. His clothes were old police uniforms stitched with cowrie shells. His eyes were white as moon milk. He said nothing, just looked at her, then smiled. "You brought your sister's echo," he said. Eduri nodded. The bone caller reached into a pouch and brought out a mirror made of broken glass and dried leaves. "Show me her eyes." Eduri gave him the pot from flat 4C. He peered into it. Then he said one word. He coughed, then whispered. She took what wasn't hers to take, gave what wasn't hers to give. The spirits waited. Now they hunger. Eduri knelt. "How do I pay it?" The bone caller stared into her soul. "Blood," he said. "Not death. Memory. You must offer the pieces she used to forget, your childhood, your bond, the love she broke." He leaned close. "You must bleed into the earth. Not just your body, your truth." Eduri whispered, "Where?" He smiled. "Where you last saw her. Where your voices cracked and your hearts broke." Eduri closed her eyes. She remembered. It wasn't the village. It wasn't the grave. It was in the Freedom Park in Lagos. Years ago. Under a tree where they last spoke. The bone caller gave her a knife made of bone and said, "Midnight. No candles. No fear. Call her name. Give her your pain. She answers, she can cross. If not," he didn't finish. Eduri bowed. And left with a heart full of shaking. The next day she walked to Freedom Park. The sun was bright, but her heart was dark. Children played. Tourists took photos. But Eduri saw none of it. She walked to the exact spot, under a large irako tree where lovers carved names and street boys told stories. She sat and waited for night. When the sky turned black and the last street lamp blinked, she stood. She drew the circle, poured crushed herbs, whispered the old names. Then, with shaking hands, she cut her palm. Blood dripped into the earth. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not understanding, for letting you go, for not knowing your pain." She took a deep breath. Then she whispered, "Omaka." The ground shook. The air turned cold. The shadows swirled. And from the wind, her sister's voice came again. The wind turned cold. Eduri's blood soaked into the soil under the irako tree like it had been waiting for years. No moon, no stars, only a sky full of silence. The city noise faded. Even the rats and hawkers went still. And then the voice came. Aduri. It wasn't angry. It wasn't soft. It was tired. Aduri knelt lower. Her bleeding palm trembled over the earth. I'm here, Amaka. I'm listening. The wind swirled in a circle. Dry leaves danced. Her hair lifted as if touched by unseen hands. The iroko tree groaned. Its bark cracked slightly. Temperature dropped like the breath of an old cave. Then Aduri saw her. First, just a figure in the dark. Then a woman in a gray scarf. Pale eyes. Skin gray like ash. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Amaka. But she didn't look like the sister from their childhood. This was a soul stretched thin. A shadow with memories. Her eyes held pain. Not hate. Not revenge. Just sorrow. You came, she whispered. Aduri nodded, fighting tears. You called me. I didn't mean to, Amaka said. I didn't want to return. But you did. I had nowhere to go, Amaka whispered. I thought dying in the city would make them forget me. I thought the spirits would get confused. But they found me. And they're angry. She floated around the circle slowly, her scarf trailing behind her like smoke. They said I broke a rule, she said. That I traded blood without permission. That I used a bond one didn't understand. You did, Aduri said, voice shaking. But that doesn't mean you should suffer forever. Amaka's form shimmered, flickering between who she was and what she'd become. I don't know how to go back, she said. I don't know how to rest. Aduri stood slowly. She wiped her bleeding palm on her wrapper and opened a pouch. From it she pulled 3 things. A lock of their mother's hair wrapped in cloth. A broken wooden flute from their childhood. And a picture of them both laughing, taken before the fighting started. These are the pieces of the truth you forgot, Aduri said. Our bond. Our laughter. Our mother. I brought them back. I offer them to the ground. Not to repay your debt, but to remind you you were once loved. Tree moaned again. The wind whistled. Amaka's eyes filled with tears. I remember the flute, she said. Mama used to hum that song when it rained. Aduri stepped into the circle. If you want peace, she said, you must ask. Not hide. Not take. Amaka bowed her head. I'm tired, Aduri. I want to sleep. But I don't know how. Let me help you, Aduri whispered. And then, she sang. A lullaby only their family knew. Soft, broken, warm. The same one Mama used to sing when the storms were loud and the power went out. As Aduri sang, the earth began to glow faintly. A light like gold mist rose from the ground. Amaka's shadow began to fade at the edges. Her feet touched the soil. Her eyes looked brighter. Then she stepped into the circle fully. And she smiled. I'm ready, she said. Aduri reached forward. They held hands for the first time in years. And then Amaka closed her eyes. The wind stopped. The leaves stilled. The city noise returned slowly, as if someone was turning up the volume on life. And when Aduri opened her eyes again, Amaka was gone. Only the gray scarf remained on the ground. And the blood had disappeared into the roots. The next morning, the newspapers carried strange headlines. Unidentified woman seen floating above Freedom Park. Cult activity or spiritual cleansing. Night of lights at midnight. Mysterious healing reported in Lagos Central Hospital after woman touches soil. But none of them knew the truth. None of them understood what it meant. Except for the ones who had heard of the bone collar. And the ones who saw what Aduri did next. She didn't leave the city. She went back to Abute Cemetery. To the place where Amaka had been buried in haste. Cracked slab. The scattered weeds. She carried a shovel. She dug. People gathered again. Afraid. Curious. Aduri dug with her bare hands until she found the wooden coffin. It was empty. She cleaned the grave, pulled out the broken slab, and then, under the almond tree nearby, she dug a new one. This time she poured oil. She burned incense. She sang. Then she placed the gray scarf inside and whispered, "Rest now. You are home." That night, no lights turned on in Flat 4C. The air was quiet. Children played near the corridor again. And someone finally rented the flat. No shadows. No footsteps. Just peace. But something had changed in Aduri. She didn't speak the same way. Her eyes shimmered like mirrors when people lied. She began hearing whispers that no one else could hear. That night, people came to her with secrets. A woman who stole from her sister. A man who beat his wife. A boy who lied about his father's death. They all confessed. She didn't judge. She just listened. And sometimes she cried with them. One night, a man in a black SUV came to her. Rich. Bold. Smelled of cigar and cologne. "I heard you see the truth," he said. Aduri said nothing. "I want to know who cursed me," he laughed. "Tell me which of my enemies wants me gone." She looked at him. "You cursed yourself," she said. He laughed harder. "You think you're smart." Then he grabbed her wrist. The wind changed. The lights flickered. And just like that, he was gone. All that remained were ashes and 3 white feathers. People stopped mocking after that. They began to call her the listener. Word spread. From Aja to Ikeja. From Wari to Abuja. About a woman in a small flat who could hear your soul. Who would not speak unless the dead whispered first. She didn't advertise. She didn't beg for attention. She just sat. And listened. And beneath the city streets, under bridges, in graveyards, the spirits finally sighed in peace. Because one of their own, Aduri, had paid the debt. And not with gold. Not with blood alone. But with truth and love and the courage to bury things properly. There was no signboard on her door. No Instagram page. No shrine with smoke and skulls. Yet every day people came. Some walked. Some crawled. Some flew in from other cities just to sit in front of Aduri's small apartment on the edge of Balagan Street. People called her many names. The listener. The one who can't be lied to. The eye beneath the scarf. Truth's last hope. But to the old woman at the end of the street who sold Puff Puff, she was still that quiet girl with the herbal basket. Aduri didn't try to be famous. She just stayed in her flat, kept her windows open, and listened. But she was no longer ordinary. Started slowly. The first sign was her voice. Carried differently now. Echoed even in whispers. People said her voice made your chest feel tight, like someone was gently pushing on your heart. A woman once came to her, crying about her husband who had vanished after a business trip. She said, "I just want to know where he went." Aduri didn't ask questions. She just looked at the woman's palm, then said quietly, "He never left. He's buried beneath your backyard garden. You planted pepper over his bones." The woman collapsed right there. Police came the next day. They found the body. Soon stories spread. A teenage boy came in boasting he had nothing to confess. He left crying. Later, his mother said he dug up a knife from under his bed and returned it to his friend, saying, "Tell your brother I didn't mean to." A market woman confessed she had stolen her sister's husband through a charm hidden inside an ogbono seed. A young pastor admitted he never heard from God, but he always heard Aduri's voice in his dreams, warning him of lies he was about to tell. People feared her, but they kept coming. Why? 'Cause no one else could carry the weight of buried truth. Aduri never took money. Only offered one thing. Confess what you buried, or it will bury you. But not everyone liked that, especially those who lived in lies. One day, a black car parked outside her flat. Two men in suits stepped out. They wore expensive watches and shoes that didn't like sand. The older one had sharp glasses. His name was Chief Iboka, a businessman turned politician, famous for his clean record. He knocked. He smiled. Aduri opened the door without a word. "I've heard of you," he said. "They say you dig up truth." She nodded once. "I'd like to test you," he said. "A small truth. Tell me, how will the next election go?" Aduri didn't blink. "You'll win the seat," she said, "but lose your soul." His face twisted. She added, "The ghost of the boy you silenced in 2002 is waiting for you on the campaign stage." Iboka chuckled. "You're good at acting. Ever thought of going into theater?" Aduri didn't answer. That night, during a live radio debate, Iboka suddenly started choking. He stood, eyes wide, scratching his neck. Then he collapsed. When they opened his mouth at the hospital, they found 2 white feathers and a piece of chalk. After that, fear turned to worship. People brought fruits, letters, bottles of honey. Someone even carved a statue of her out of black soap and placed it on the bridge she once walked across to find the bone collar. But Aduri refused every gift. She stayed silent. She still lived in her small flat. Still cooked her soup with scent leaf. Still boiled water before drinking. But now even rats avoided her doorstep. Then one day she received a letter. Plain envelope. No name. Just 3 words. "Come to Yiru." Her hands shook. She hadn't heard that word in years. Yiru Hill was where her grandmother was buried. A forgotten place between the edges of New Lagos and the forest no developer had touched. That night she packed a small bag. Herbs. A bottle of clean water. Her scarf. And just before dawn she walked. No bike. No car. Just her feet and the whispering wind. Yiru was still the same. Dry paths. Whispering trees. The sound of insects like old drums. But something was waiting. At the top of the hill stood a little boy with dust on his feet and a tear-shaped birthmark on his cheek. He didn't smile. He said, "My brother is trapped." "Like your sister was?" Aduri asked. "Where is he?" The boy pointed to a small clearing with cracked earth. "He was buried without truth," the boy whispered. "Now he pulls others down." Aduri didn't wait. She dropped to her knees. She pulled the scarf over her face. And she listened. From the cracked earth came a voice, not loud, not soft, just there like heat in an oven. "I didn't mean to die." Aduri's heart stilled. "I just wanted to be believed." The boy's brother had been a street preacher, accused falsely of theft, beaten, killed, buried quietly behind the church wall. No prayer, no apology, just silence. Now his soul screamed through children's dreams and made dogs bark at empty corners. Aduri placed her hand on the earth. "You are not forgotten." She sprinkled her own blood. She recited the name. She broke the silence. And then she let the earth drink the truth. By morning, birds returned to the hill. The boy smiled. Then he vanished. Aduri stood. Her legs shook. But her spirit glowed. The wind carried a new name now. The Sister of Shadows. Back in the city, people spoke differently. They no longer said, "May I never die poor." They now said, "May I never be buried with lies." Aduri had changed the meaning of silence. Even children understood. They would say, "If you lie too much, she'll come in your dreams." And at night, many whispered the new proverb. Better to speak truth to the living than whisper it to the dead. Still, Aduri didn't stop. She went to cemeteries and listened. She visited bridges and alleyways where forgotten people had died. She walked into hospitals and stood by dying beds. Sometimes she sat beside a man in a taxi and said, "Call your mother. You're leaving tonight." Sometimes she just touched someone's shoulder, and they cried, 'cause they knew they had buried something inside, and she was digging it out. But Aduri began to change too. She slept less. A soft glow stayed in her eyes. Sometimes when she spoke, her voice came out as two voices, hers and her sister's. She no longer feared shadows. She became one with them. Then one night she stood outside her flat. She looked at the sky and said, "It's time." She walked into the darkness without a bag, without a word, and disappeared. In the morning, her room was empty. No scarf. No basket. Just one thing on the floor. A mirror made of bone and ash. And beside it a note. "Truth can't die. It only changes form." I didn't leave. I just moved deeper. And just like that, Aduri became legend.